Salams from the People's Dispatch studios in New Delhi. I'm Siddhant Aini and you're watching Daily Debrief. On the show today, we examine the political climate in Lebanon ahead of the May 15 elections. We look at the impact of an unprecedented heat wave in India and why another US state has passed extremely regressive anti-abortion laws. First up, on the 15th of May, Lebanon heads for parliamentary elections. Many say it's the most crucial election in that country's history. It's in the throes of a major economic decline. Public and essential services are non-existent, and food prices have risen over 500% in the recent past. After massive protests in 2019, a caretaker government was installed but did not work to resolve any of these issues. Lebanon recently signed an extraordinary regulation that will hurt people even more. It allows banks to take over any deposits. As the elections come around, there is widespread anger against cancelled subsidies, failed essential services, and lack of food supplies, medicine, healthcare, and education. People's Dispatch's Abdul covers the region. I spoke to him earlier for an update on what makes these elections so critical. Abdul, good to see you again on Daily Debrief. If you could give us first an overview of the politics, the domestic politics in Lebanon, particularly what is happening there that makes this election so crucial?
As we all know, in last 3 years, almost 2.5 years, Lebanon is going through a kind of political turmoil. Apart from the economic crisis, which is considered to be one of the worst in last 200 years. So the political crisis in particular is basically that after the resignation of Saad Hariri in October 2019, there has not been a stable government, and the streets in particular have been very active. The people have been demonstrating for in the last 2.5 years, which is also the period of the COVID. So all these things basically led to a kind of creation of a kind of very chaotic situation in Lebanon, where the governments, instead of focusing on the crucial economic issues, basically have been devoting their time to kind of create a working cabinet. So that has been the primary focus of the Lebanese politics in the last 2.5 years. In between, in 2020 August, the blast in Beirut, which is considered to be the biggest non-nuclear blast in human history, which killed more than 200 people, also created a kind of added into that chaotic situation which Lebanon was going through or is going through. So uncertainty about the government, uncertainty about the political formations which can deal with the economic situation, added into the, you can say, the more and more, you can say, deepening of the economic crisis. So which could have been easily kind of not completely, but actually could have been tackled to some level because of the lack of the government, lack of the political government, politically stable government. This basically became a chaotic situation. So that situation persists. At this moment, when this caretaker government is trying to negotiate a deal with the International Monetary Fund, it is not sure whether this will have the public backing or not. So at this moment, this uncertainty adds to all the attempts to kind of recover from the economic problems which Lebanon is facing at this particular moment. Yeah.
Right. So, Abdul, given that political context domestically, we also have, of course, the so-called international community that is actively involved in Lebanon, particularly Western aid agencies as well. What kind of role or what kind of influence do they have on domestic Lebanese politics?
If we know the history of Lebanon, and particularly its relationship with the regional and the global players, it is quite obvious that there are two major players outside the region. One is France, and another one is the United States of America. The US basically has a very, you can say, significant impact on countries' economic policies. The banking system, which has collapsed in last 2 and 3 years, is basically a creation of the US interventions, the kind of pressures US created and the kind of policies the Lebanese elites have followed. France, on the other hand, basically has its imperial ambitions. We know it was Lebanon was once a colony of France, and that I think particularly Macron basically thinks that Lebanon still is his backyard, and he can do whatever he wants to do. So, if you see what particularly after the blast in August 2020, Macron has been very actively participating in basically the political bargain, basically political scenario in Lebanon. So their intervention is basically has strengthened the political elite in Lebanon, which is not liked by the large section of the Lebanese citizenry. And basically that adds into the larger political turmoil in the country. As far as the international agencies are concerned, the IMF in particular has been, we know that Lebanon's economy is primarily debt-run economy, which basically borrowed money is the basic source of its economic strength. And Lebanon, IMF has been putting conditionalities, which basically during this time of economic crisis has created worsened the economic situation for the common Lebanese. So as far as regional players are concerned, we know that there is Hezbollah, which is considered to be a close ally of Iran. There are many perceptions involved. We don't know how much Iranian influence is there, but of course there is some kind of intervention is there. Whether that intervention has played what kind of role, that is a question. Collaboration with Iran basically created a temporary relief for a large section of Lebanese population. So these are different kinds of role regional players have played in Lebanon. One particular thing, and which is very crucial, is the role of Saudi Arabia. So Lebanon was considered to be, in collaboration with US, you can say a playground for Saudi Arabia. Particularly the Hariri family's close relationship with Saudi Arabia had a major role in shaping the Lebanese policies, particularly after 1990. But in last few years, that influence has weathered away, particularly because of the dominance of the Hezbollah in the Lebanese politics. So that has created a kind of a situation where Saudi Arabia, being the richest regional player, has also withdrawn to some extent, and basically which has added into the economic concerns, problems Lebanese are facing. Yeah.
Finally, Abdul, and as quickly as you can possibly, come May 15th, when these parliamentary elections are held, who are the major forces that are going to be in the fray, and what are people on the streets telling you? How is it likely to go?
There are mixed reports coming. There are mixed responses also. Of course, there are traditional political groups divided into two, Hezbollah and its allies, which is a Free Patriotic Movement and the Amal. These are the major Hezbollah allies. So they are in one camp, and they are considered to be the front runners. But there is an opposition group also, Lebanese Forces, the other major Christian party, and its allies, but they are scattered because Saad Hariri decided not to contest this time, and his party is also not contesting this time. That space, which was basically dominated by that Saad Hariri's party, is basically open for new players to fill in. So apart from these traditional players, there are this time in particular, as we were discussing earlier, the street, the forces which basically are looking for alternative, looking to change the political system in Lebanon, are also contesting election, and they have some of them, smaller parties, have come together, formed various joint lists, and they are also contesting. They are also gaining some kind of popular traction. We don't know how much it will be and whether they will be able to upset the dominant players in Lebanese politics or not, but they are in the race, and it will be very crucial to see how they are doing it in the final counting. If they are able to win significant number of seats, their claim to kind of change in the Lebanese political system, particularly against the quota system, sectarian quota system, Shia, Sunnis, and Christians, that particular system will be under a significant challenge. So
Right.
yes, it is too early to say which way the final results will come out, but it seems that there is an interesting contest. Yeah.
Thanks very much for telling us, Abdul, why these May 15th elections are so crucial for Lebanon. We will, of course, keep you updated on developments there as they come in, and Abdul will keep reporting on that story. And finally, temperatures in South Asia are hitting record levels. In India's capital, New Delhi, where we sit today, thermometers crossed the 45 degrees centigrade mark and we are likely to experience all-time record highs for the month of April. March was already the hottest in 122 years of recorded temperature data. In Pakistan, Jacobabad, one of the hottest spots on the planet, the 50-degree mark will likely be breached. In Argentina and Paraguay, there is an exceptional heat wave. Temperatures are set to reach 40 degrees centigrade in Paraguay today, along with a heat wave up to 38 degrees in China, 36 degrees in Turkey and Cyprus. As emissions drive further heating, these dangerous extremes are likely to become more common. We're joined now by D. Raghunandan of the Delhi Science Forum. Raghu, thanks very much for joining us on Daily Debrief this afternoon. First up, there seems to be some new research indicating direct links between these heat waves that we are currently experiencing and climate change. Are these linkages new, and if so, why are they important?
Firstly, the linkage between the heat waves and climate change is, to my mind, a fairly well-established trend. Although meteorologists and scientists would be careful not to very directly impute a direct correlation between 1 year's temperature pattern and climate change. Right. It is better to think in terms of trends. And if you look in terms of trends, it is fairly clear that we have been witnessing, certainly since 2010, a very clear correlation between early onset of summer, that is starting in fairly early March, and higher temperatures in March, April. This has been noticed since 2010, including by the Indian Meteorological Department, and this has been cited in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, which was released a few months ago. So right. The trend is fairly clear, and I think there is very little to be gained by quibbling about whether it is true in 2021, whether it is true in 2022, whether this year's, because after all, the temperature profile or the heat wave does not come with a rubber stamp on it saying due to climate change. Yeah. These are trends observed over a period of time. And it is also to be noted that these trends confirm the predictions which have been made by climate scientists and meteorologists going back to the third assessment report in 2007, that this would be the trend which would be witnessed in South Asia, which is early onset of summer and a higher frequency of heat waves and more intense heat waves. So the trend is, I think, fairly clear. And this year also, we saw that March was the hottest March season that we know since we started recording temperatures regularly in this country in 120 years ago.
Right.
And unsurprisingly, the year 2020 was also the hottest March in the past 120 years.
Right.
And we have now this year broken that record also. So we are likely to see this trend intensify, and maybe next year or the year after that, we will say this is the hottest March in 22, beating the record of the year 2022. So these trends, I think, are noticeable and are clear in attributing these phenomena to climate change.
Right. What of clearly we are seeing lots of reports, Raghu, on the impact that these heat waves are having on people. Specifically, if we're looking at an already crisis-ridden agricultural sector that is being exacerbated by the unprecedented sort of temperatures. What are scientists or what is the scientific community suggesting in terms of measures for people to find a way, or at least a temporary kind of solution before governments get their act together and we can take perhaps steps towards mitigating some of these factors?
See, unfortunately, the government and governmental scientific and agricultural institutions have been very slow off the starting line on this. These trends were known and were predicted 10, 15 years ago. And there has been enough time to prepare for it, to think in terms of alternatives, and to start preparing for it. If we start thinking about alternatives and preparing for them today, it will take another 8 to 10 years before we start putting them into action on the ground. Unfortunately, we are losing time. In terms of what the scientific community or the agricultural scientists could do, right now, even today, the meteorological department is couching its observations on the climate in very cautious terms, or on the impact in terms of wheat output. Because as we know, this present government, for example, is not particularly well known for evidence-based decision-making. And its first reaction is to start questioning the evidence itself.
Right.
So if the Met Department says wheat crop has been affected, or if agricultural scientists, then government will immediately come back and say, what is your proof? How do you know? They will produce evidence from here and not from there, and start disputing that thing. So the point is that I think these trends are known and preparatory measures should be taken. I would like to quickly sort of spell out, if possible, what are the impacts that have been noted, and therefore what kind of precautions and changes should we be working towards. Right now, going by empirical evidence of farmers, in parts of Western UP, in parts of Madhya Pradesh, and also in parts of Punjab and Haryana, farmers are reporting 20%, 15 to 20% loss of wheat weight per hectare because of the early onset of summer and the early heat at the time of harvest. Met Department, Agriculture Department are being more cautious and are saying, we'll await for the data, etc., and we will come to it. We may have to say that effect would be a 9 to 10% reduction. Whatever it is, the point is it's going to be a substantial reduction. 9 to 10% is not particularly small. And even 9 to 10% would be an average, meaning that certain parts would definitely be 15 to 20%.
Higher than that, yeah.
Higher. So we need to think in terms of shifting some of the wheat crop to other parts of the country which are less amenable to this heat stress, which is going to be most notable in northwestern India. And we may also have to repeat this for paddy, which is grown in Punjab and Haryana as well. We are yet to see the impacts of that, but trends are likely to be similar. Agriculturists have also been warning, not today, but 10, 15 years ago, that the paddy wheat cycle of cultivation in Punjab is unsustainable, not only from the point of view of weather and climate, but also from the point of view of water and from the point of view of the crop cycle. And we have already seen that the gap between the wheat and the paddy harvest and the paddy sowing season is so short that farmers in Punjab and Haryana are forced to set light to their stubble, because there's no way of clearing the stubble in the short time of 2 weeks available. And if we start getting summer early in March, this will further reduce that gap. So we are already in trouble and we are late in moving. We know, for example, that in Himachal Pradesh, apples no longer grow at 3,500 feet altitude. This has been happening and observed over the past 15 years, and there has been no response by the government. That should give us the clue that we should not have the same kind of lethargy and let us see and attitude, but start acting on this very fast in consultation with farmers.
The US state of Oklahoma has passed the strictest anti-abortion laws in the United States. The two new laws make almost any abortion illegal in the state. They are now awaiting the governor's ratification. The laws bring attention back to the conservative-dominated American Supreme Court. It has 6 conservative judges against 3 liberals. In June, the court will decide whether the country's constitution protects the right to abortion. The court could rewrite state abortion laws, or it could overturn the Roe versus Wade ruling that made abortion a right back in 1973. The June decision may leave states free to enact their own laws on abortion. But even before the court makes its decision, US states with Republican administrations have started changing their own abortion laws. Several of these states are pushing for a ban on all abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy, going against a 1992 ruling that set the cutoff at 23 weeks. I spoke earlier to Natalia Marquez of People's Dispatch. Natalia, good to have you on Daily Debrief with us today. It's early in the morning. Unfortunately, we're not talking about a particularly positive story by any means. Could you tell us a bit about these two laws that the Oklahoma legislature has passed, what exactly they contain?
Yeah, so one of the laws, Senate Bill 1503, Oklahoma Heartbeat Act, so that would prohibit abortions when a physician can detect a heartbeat in a fetus. So that can be as early as 6 weeks into a pregnancy. That's before many women even know that they're pregnant. And the measure does provide some exceptions for medical emergencies. And the Senate also passed House Bill 4327, very similar to SB 1503. This allows private citizens to bring civil lawsuits against abortion providers. So this empowers citizens to actually perform vigilantism in enforcing these abortion bans. And it would actually prohibit abortions at any point in the pregnancy, even before 6 weeks. So this would provide exceptions for medical emergencies, or if the pregnancy was a result of rape, sexual assault, or incest, and also reported to law enforcement. So there's also that caveat. And so this still needs to be passed again by the House after it was amended by the Senate.
Right. How do we view these two laws in the context of other legislation that's being enacted across several states, most of which are run by Republican administrations?
Yeah, so there's a nationwide attack on abortion rights right now in the country. This particular ban in Oklahoma is very similar to the Texas abortion ban, which also empowers citizens to enforce the law rather than the state. The Mississippi abortion ban is a little bit different. It empowers the state to enforce the law, but all across the country, especially in the south part of the United States, abortion is under attack. And Yeah, I mean, there's a widespread effort by conservative politicians to infringe on this right, on this right to healthcare. A woman recently was arrested in Texas, Lizelle Herrera, for the allegation is that she had an abortion. It's not 100% known, but she was arrested, held on $500,000 bail. There was a widespread uproar and outrage across the country, and she was eventually, the charges were eventually dropped. She had actual murder charges presented against her. So this is part of a widespread concerted attack.
Right. Finally, Natalia, we have another minute or so to go on the show. What sort of response has there been from civil society, from women's sort of organizations, from the public health fraternity to this sort of legislation, and at a federal level, what are we likely to see in the coming months?
Yes, so women's organizations are paying a lot of attention to this issue. There is a mass movement. There have been protests for all of these different abortion bans. The issue is that like sitting politicians, especially the center-left party, Democratic Party, are not at all, well, to some extent, they're not necessarily fighting back against this as much as the Republican politicians are fighting for this. So right. On the federal level, there's inaction. In civil society, women's organizations, the left in the US, they're paying increasing attention to this. Women are really coming out into the streets. The trick is to really build a mass movement that can present enough of a challenge to these conservative politicians that a lot of these bans could actually be overturned before they eventually threaten Roe v. Wade on the federal level.
Right. All right. Thank you so much for those updates, Natalia, and I hope you'll keep tracking that story for us, and we can update our viewers as and when.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
That's all we have on Daily Debrief for today. For more details on these stories and all of the other work we do, please head on over to our website, peoplesdispatch.org, and give us a follow on all the regular social media platforms for updates. We'll be back again tomorrow. See you then. Goodbye.